Well, hello once again. Welcome back to In the Growth Space. I'm David, and I am your host here on Season 2, Episode 15. I really appreciate you joining me here. You know, our goal with the podcast, I say it every time, every week, is really to help you, our listener, to move forward in your growth journey and to move forward in whatever area of life that you're focused on. Whether it's your financial life, whether it's your leadership, whether it's your company growth. And we do that through sharing conversations. Sometimes I actually share some teaching from my own life, my own journey. But at the end of the day, our hope is that you learn something through these conversations. And honestly, one of the best ways that you can move your growth forward beyond just listening to the podcast is through our annual event called the Inner Circle Summit. You know, it happens once a year. It's happened for the last 4 years. And this year, it's going to be a fantastic event like all of the rest. We just keep getting better with them. And you'll be able to really be in the energy of some really high-performing leaders. And that energy is super infectious. So if you haven't registered yet, you still have time. That is, at least if you're listening before December 12th. So go to davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit 2022 and get your seat. You know, we've had teams register. We've had some individual leaders register from different parts of the world, leaders from the UK and North America. We're going to be having some sessions around being well so that we can lead well. You know, we're going to have a session on breath work. We're going to have one on emotional intelligence and another on moving through fear. One more on clarifying and living from your values. And then my buddy Andy Hall and I are going to do a session on the value of community and masterminding. And it's really going to be a great growth environment, a great networking opportunity as well. So we hope that you will join us. Just go to davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit 2022. We'll make sure that we put that in the show notes as well. Now, today, our guest is a guy by the name of Justin Brown. And Justin has spent nearly a decade coaching at multiple levels in the baseball industry. If you know me, you know I love baseball. And at the age of 26, he became one of the youngest head coaches in the NCAA. Now, alongside his coaching duties, he has served as a collegiate athletic administrator as well as a professor in strategic leadership in sport. And after successfully leading 2 collegiate baseball programs, Justin left the coaching ranks to spend more time with his family and launch the Stay the Course leadership course. And he's the author also of Stay the Course, 5 Transformational Principles of Leaders Who Last. And this is a really great episode. I will say, though, that the audio from my end was a bit wonky. I'm not exactly sure what happened with Zoom when we recorded this, but just bear with the audio in the episode. I know you're going to get a lot of it out of it. So here's my conversation with Justin Brown. Well, hey, Justin, welcome to In the Growth Space. I'm really excited for this conversation, man. We've just been talking a little bit off air before we hit record, and I said, oh my goodness, we better get recording because this is too good to miss. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it and excited to dive into some good topics here and really glad to be here.
Well, and I know that we share a heartbeat for emerging leaders. And I'd love to, before we get into the kind of emerging leaders topic, I would love to just kind of hear your story a little bit. You, at a really young age, became a coach, an NCAA coach. And talk a little bit about that. Like, how did that happen? And tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, so I grew up, playing athletics. Sports were kind of everything at a healthy level. I never had any unhealthy rhythms with that. My parents were incredible, but it became kind of my outlet. And when you're middle school and younger, something that you get some confidence from is a good thing. And so athletics and sports became that. And so I ran track, I ran cross country, I wrestled, and played baseball, and eventually played baseball in college at a small college near Columbus, Ohio, Mount Vernon Nazarene University. And that chapter was a big deal for my life. And I played for a Hall of Fame coach. And really, I look back and think that was a big deal to be around someone who, I mean, this season, he got his 1100th win. So he's been excellent at what he's been doing for a long time. And I think it just, as an athlete, it just planted seeds for me. Like, wow, this is a career path. I didn't even know that existed, that you can be a coach and do this full time and grow a program and things like that. So I stayed on as an assistant after graduating there, and spent three and a half years kind of underneath his wing. He's still a mentor of mine to this day, but really started to learn the ins and outs, and had the opportunity at 26 to become a head coach at NCAA Division III level. And so we moved across the country and was at a school in Minneapolis, Minnesota, downtown. And then after that, moved to another school in Georgia, in Northeast Georgia. And then eventually just said, I think I'm ready to try some other things. And here we are now.
Well, we're in Northeast Georgia. I'm curious because I got family down there.
Yeah, Tacoma Falls College.
I wondered if that was it. Yeah.
Yep. So not far from Clemson, and the border there. Was an awesome area of the country. Beautiful. We loved it.
Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. Yeah. How long were you there?
So that was the COVID year. So we were there about a year. And I had kind of been on the way out before COVID hit, and then we just kind of scrambled, is the word I would use. And well,
let's talk a little bit about I'm curious about your mentor, the coach that just had his 1100th win. What were some of the things that were foundational to your growth and your leadership underneath his mentorship?
Yeah, so his name's Keith Veal, and I think there's a lot of things he affected for me in my leadership life. And one thing that as I got to know him really well towards the back end of my playing career into being an assistant, the thing that I think we bonded on the most early was just reading. We'd be on bus trips, we'd be going places, and he was always reading, and I was a reader, and so we'd share titles, and so I think it was just he kind of embodied that lifelong learner. He's in his 50s, 60s now, and he's still just hammering material, hammering information, just consuming and applying, what he's doing. And, I think the other thing I learned from him, his style is unique. It was the first coach I ever had that never yelled. I can think maybe in the entire time I was with him, he raised his voice to a screaming level 3 times, maybe. And, that's not usually, associated with athletic coaches. We kind of have the fire breather, just, Bear Bryant yelling and screaming. And so his style intrigued me. I responded well to it as an athlete, but I look back and think, man, it just shows that there's so many different unique styles of leadership, and you almost have to be true to who you are. It would have been kind of awkward if he was always screaming, or he turned into a yeller and a motivator that way. It kind of would have been like, this isn't really unique, this isn't genuine him. And so that was something that has kind of stuck with me over the years. I find now doing the work I'm doing, I still keep in touch with him often and talk, but I find myself reflecting back things I've learned about leadership in other areas of life, and in coaching and being away, and then going, wow, this was the perfect example of that concept, or he really lived it. He's just a phenomenal leader.
Yeah, man, there's so much in just that sharing about his leadership and your observation of him. I think that so often more is caught than taught, as the saying goes in leadership. We find a mentor that we really admire, we can really look at their lives and learn an awful lot. And when we see somebody reading and we see what they're reading, we can kind of follow in their footsteps and learn what they're learning and gain such, wisdom from them. And I really appreciate that. It's also interesting too. I loved your comment about he found his own style, or, he was just who he was. He wasn't, a yeller. And I think that so oftentimes in leadership, we think that the leader has to be the most
Yeah.
vocal or verbal.
Right.
It's not true at all. We can be that quiet leader that just is constant and is disciplined, and it shows by example.
For
I'm
sure.
curious what if that was some of the things that you picked up as
Oh,
well.
certainly. And as you're talking, another thought came to my mind that I think we falsely associate volume level or extroverted
Yeah.
personality. We falsely kind of use those to describe what I would call presence. So Coach
Mhm.
Beal had a leadership presence that was very powerful. He wasn't dominating or anything, but you knew when he was in the room. So he wasn't, his silence was not traded off for a lack of authority, or a
Right.
lack of, control or leadership. So I think what we're getting at is presence, and he had it. You can say few words and have a very, very strong presence, or you can be a loud, bubbly, social extrovert and have presence too. It really comes down to just being aware of his presence, because I believe over time it was calculated.
Yeah.
He always entered, and there was a leadership presence. Maybe you could even call it an executive presence that he had, regardless of whether he was an extreme introvert or extrovert. It just kind of was irrelevant. The presence is what it is.
I'm curious if you, as you observed him and watched him, like what were some of the things that you picked up to also have your own leadership presence? Because I know that as we were talking before we started recording, we work a lot with emerging leaders, and I think that emerging leaders want to be able to have that executive presence, or at least learn to be confident and be that leader that walks in the room, and people know they're there. So what were some
Yeah.
of the things or the principles maybe that he taught you?
Yeah. So, and I think it was all organic, learned. Like you said, more is
Yeah.
caught than taught. Because I can't recall a single time where he ever sat down and said, "Hey, now Justin, grab a notebook and
Yeah.
pen." And so
Good.
it was all just kind of observing. But I think that the idea around presence, what I learned is you have to be very intentional with that. There's a fine line between being overly insecure. Like a middle schooler entering a cafeteria feels like all the eyes are on you. Was a young emerging leader, the truth is the eyes probably aren't on you, but there is this balancing act of that doesn't mean I want to approach and be sloppy with my appearance or sloppy with my presence. Am I paying attention? Am I on my phone? Those types of things. I think what it set off was a period of my life as a young emerging leader saying, I'm going to really just kind of practice this. I'm going to enter this room. I'm the youngest one in the room, and how can I, be taken seriously? Can I take myself seriously by entering this environment and really showing that I'm here to learn and grow and contribute to the room? If I'm called on, great. If I'm not, I'm still going to contribute based on my focus and attention to detail. And so I think that's an experience young emerging leaders can go through. Is you can practice it. You can go in and out of focusing on it again with a fine balancing act of not being narcissistic, thinking everyone's looking at you. That's not what we're getting at. So I think that
Yeah.
it's something that is a skill that you can develop, I think. And he
Yeah.
had it over years. I think he really had that down.
It brings to my mind one of my mentors who talks about just the law of consistency, and doing the small things over and over and over. It seems so boring. It seems like maybe nothing is happening,
Yep.
but by virtue of just doing those things, and you used a really great word that I'm so keen on, and that is intentional. By being intentional about the things that you're doing day in and day out, especially when it's boring, or especially when you don't want to do it. Emerson said that when you do you need to do the thing in order to get the energy to do the thing. And I often
Mm,
say that, look, you just got to do it, and even despite your feelings, and when you do it, then you're going to start to get the energy to do those things. And so that those small things over time really add up.
they
Are there some
do.
are there some small things that you like? What are some of your leadership practices that you found that have been really helpful for you as in your leadership?
Yeah. So I think for me, I've learned kind of my own leadership journey. And really, when I became a head coach at 26, and now I'm running my own program, and you think you're prepared for something like that, and then you quickly realize I'm in over my head here, and so that really forced a couple year period there of going. I have to get some rhythms. I have to get some practices, as you called them, and get some things in order. And I think one of the things is that I've just kind of developed is the ability to journal and just really take an inventory of what
After
am
my
I.
own heart.
Yeah, yeah. And getting a process for just again taking inventory and evaluating like what's really going on internally. And I really feel like leadership life it sucks you into a pace that is not sustainable. If you're in a role like that, you've probably got some drive in you, some achiever, some I want to go getter. I don't think a lot of passive, kind of lethargic people land in situations like that. So I have found kind of just developing practices to keep myself in check, to keep my motor in check. I think of when I was a kid, we go golfing, and I still kind of would want to do it now. But if you've ever been on a golf cart and you go down a hill, some courses will have like a governor installed on their golf
Yeah.
cart, and I always thought like this is kind of lame. I want to really make this golf cart talk here.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so
Right.
that kind of analogy, I think, is really when we get into practices, especially journaling for me, it's kind of like installing a governor on my own motor and saying, like, whoa, slow down now. Like, we've got to be in tune with my emotions, my fears. What am I afraid of? What part of my identity is under threat in my leadership role right now? Am I feeling underappreciated? Am I feeling like there's so much stuff underneath the hood for a leader? There's so much stuff. There's a massive garden that must be tended to. And so for journaling, that's been one way for me, going for running or walking or those types of things. But I think it's a non-negotiable for an emerging leader to develop those things. No one is Superman, Superwoman who can just, I don't need any of that. I'm just go. We've seen so many things leaders burn out. It's not even really up for debate. You must develop practices and rhythms that work for you. And it comes down to it has to work for you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that it has to work for you, because so oftentimes we see, especially like our mentors, and they typically are a few steps ahead of us. They are in a different season of life, and we think, oh gosh, well, we got to do that. Well, that's not going to work. I mean,
Right.
you've got young kids, and so my kids are practically all grown, and so
Yeah.
my season of life is different than yours. So we have to do the things that are going to fit for us. I mean, and
So
um,
true.
and I think that as I was listening to you talk about like journaling and like exercise and just doing those things, those rhythms, it's really a lot like fundamentals. It's like the fundamentals of any game. I mean, you grew up in baseball, and I know we shared a little bit of baseball stories as I was growing up as a kid. I mean, what do you do in baseball practice to start the practice? A lot of times you're taking, if you're an infielder, you're taking ground ball practice. You're an outfielder, you're taking pop flies. And so those are the fundamentals. You got to do the fundamentals. You got to be able to field the ground ball.
Yep.
Take batting practice. You got to be able to hit the ball. And those things done consistently over time are so important for emerging leaders. I just love
So
that. And
true.
I love talk a little bit about your journaling practice for a second, if you don't care, because I think there's too often, especially for guys. I mean, I'm going to speak to the guys for a second. So if you're a lady that's listening, it may come easier for you, but for guys, I think this is one area that's really tough. And I want to just encourage you, if you are a guy, to start a journaling practice. Contact Justin or me. We'll be happy to share that with you. But
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your journaling practice. Like, what does it entail? How do you do it? And just to kind of
Yep.
give some people, a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah. So for me personally, it's kind of taken a few different forms. I love kind of looking at it almost like if you can picture a baseball field, there's a foul pole on one end and there's a foul pole on the other end. And so anything in between those two foul poles is fair game, is how I kind of have structured mine. So there's times where my journaling practice will have a more spiritual component. I'm a Christian, and so it's tied in with scripture reading and things like that. And it's really just a part of my daily life. There's other times where it's just, what am I feeling right now? And I just write it down. There's something about transferring it from your mind and kind of that process of kind of what's going on, why I maybe snapped at my kid, or there's some angst going on. And so that, practice of just saying, what am I feeling right now? It has really helped me. And then other times it's more just kind of like a mind dump. or ideas or concepts. Or, I'm a writer, so I spend a lot of time just teasing around with ideas that eventually turn into content or a book or something. And so that's become kind of like hey, let me just write this down. I think of, there was an amazing documentary on Netflix about Jerry Seinfeld. And, he had this, accordion folder binder thing that had just thousands of legal pad yellow notes. And it kind of put in my head that there's an intentionality that must take place, whether it's journaling or just there's some form of documentation of your journey that you have to do. That over time it's just it's a good practice to include. And so it's also tied into, I think, for I view leadership as a skill. I view the leadership lifestyle as a skill. And I look at a guy like Jerry Seinfeld, who looks like, if there's ever a person that you just think is running on natural talent, he's the type of guy that you go, oh, he's just naturally funny. And when I saw this documentary about, his notepad and his documentation and just the effort he was putting in to his practice and his craft, I thought, man, there is no such thing as just winging it. There's no such thing as he's a natural leader, he's a natural comedian. Behind the scenes, there's always some work. We call it the deep work that goes on where you're intentional about your life, your day to day. And then over time that stacks up and you've got stuff. The other day I was even, looking back a year ago, and I was like, let me go see what some journal entries were like around this time. Fascinating for me to look back and think about what was stressing me out at the time, what I was worried about at the time, and how things have worked out. And it's been a practice that's a non-negotiable for me now, and young leaders, if you're listening, you got to dive in on that practice or develop something like that. Set your foul poles, and then anything in there is fair game.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that, so often we think of journaling as, just this, this practice that doesn't have a purpose, but it really does have a purpose. And I also love that you shared that it kind of varies, because it reflects my practice as well. And I'm sure, and some other, leaders that I know, because sometimes it's just a brain dump, sometimes it's an idea. It's what am I working on right now? And it gives me a chance to kind of like flesh out some stuff. And even if I'm frustrated, I can express that on paper. And it's amazing, like you said, how expressing it on paper just gets it out of your head and into the physical world. It's kind of like one of my mentors says, it's like, it's like the magic wand. It's the first like manifestation of the thought that came within you out into the physical world. And it's kind of a cool way to think about like creation. Like when we create a new plan, we create a new program, we create anything. It has to start in our mind first and then get out onto paper into the physical world.
That's a cool way to look at it.
So tell me a little bit about your work, Justin. Like, what are some of the things that you're doing with emerging leaders right now, and how are you, really helping emerging leaders be intentional with their leadership?
Yeah. So we work with kind of emerging leaders in a range of professions, some athletic coaching, some the medical field, some in ministry, and some in business. And it kind of varies on who comes in and when they come in. And so we've got a program called the Stay the Course Academy, which is just an online virtual cohort that goes 4 weeks at a time. And oftentimes we'll have a cohort full of people from all walks of life, all leadership life. And so that's a fun experience, because I think then someone in ministry and someone in business ultimately go, I'm facing the same stuff, and leadership is leadership, and, navigating your own lifestyle and your own, purposeful pursuits and things like that. There's some commonality. Other times we'll do what we call like a closed group cohort. So a company or a business will bring in 10 of their leaders, and we'll go through it's that internal group. So they're all in the same spot. They're all coworkers and employees, and we go through that. That has kind of led to some one-on-one coaching, where we'll go through some leadership coaching over months period. We'll define some goals and tackle some things. And then this fall we're launching kind of our first community mastermind group, where it's kind of a collection of all those people and others who can get in and just get a part of an environment. We call it the Stay the Course Academy because I've always admired like a boxing training gym. I'm not a boxer. I wrestled growing up, but I've always just thought like that atmosphere seems like it would be really life-giving. It's that, they're all going for their own pursuits. Maybe you've got a fighter in one weight class who's a top contender, and then another essentially teammate in another weight class who's fighting in a different arena, but they train in the same spot. And so we've kind of created this idea of bringing a leadership academy together that, from all walks of life, whatever fight's going on, we're doing the same thing, and we can train together in a sense. I haven't found anything like that yet. That it excites me a lot to get a type of environment like that together, because I feel like those environments, when everyone's really chasing their own visions and dreams and goals, and trying to excel in their own arenas, it's just life giving to anyone who's around. And so that'll be launching this fall, and we're pumped to see that get going. So, but most of the time when we work with leaders, the content, so a lot of people are, what is leadership coaching? What is this? And we really try to tackle one central concept that we found in all leaders and really all people, is this idea of drift. And drift is this magnetic force that happens in a high performer's life. I will level it at high performer because they're usually aware of it and are fighting it the most. Where you have some intentions, you want to tackle something, but there's just this natural slide process where things aren't really as tight and intentional as you want. And over time, that leads to a collection of issues. And so we really, the work we've done with leaders in the last few years, that theme just kind of kept coming up. And so we kind of surrounded most of what we're doing around the idea of drift and fighting drift in our life.
That's so important. And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it, I think as a young leader, I was around some older leaders, or leaders who had been around for a while in the industry. I was in the insurance industry, and so often I saw those people, those high achievers, they did reach a peak, but then they just kind of leveled off, and they to use your term, they drifted. They just kind of let things happen. And it's they got lazy, and
Yeah.
so
Mhm.
I think that it's so important to have the the thrust, the drive to be able to keep going to, I call it like the second mountain. You get to
Yeah.
the top, you get to the summit, and you think that's all there is. But unless you look out and you kind of look on the horizon and see that second mountain, it's like, that's the next thing I'm conquering. That's the next thing
Yeah.
I'm going. And I think we all need that to fight that drift, don't you?
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. And we kind of view leadership life like this destination-less
Yeah,
journey. And,
yeah,
and that's what we're really after. And most of the leaders we're working with, we're trying to instill that mentality that, you're not really trying to hit, like you said, that mountain and then, okay, I'm done. We want the motor to keep running. We want it to be healthy. We want to be full of joy and groundedness, and have some longevity. But what we're finding is, when it comes to drift, there's just different types. It could be, we would call it like courage drift. There's you made some decisions to live a certain way, and it takes some courage to follow through with that. Or maybe it's discipline drift. You know what to do, but we're just not following through with it, and that's human nature. And others, it might be purpose drift. Like you're at a point maybe where you're going, I don't really know what I really want to do anymore. And
mm-hmm.
ambitions and motivation drift is another. And there's all these kinds of hidden conflicts that are going on in a leader's life, and really all humans' life, I really believe. But it's really pertinent to a leader. But there's just these hidden conflicts, this hidden tension, where there's something driving our day to day that maybe when that's achieved or is it taken care of, it won't be there to drive later. What do we do then? So it's developing this idea that it's destinationless. We're doing this to the end of time. We're ready until our lives are done. How do we continue on this course? I don't know if it's just modern day. It may have always been this way, but that idea of, if I can just grind until I hit this level, then I'll call the dogs off. I've never seen that go well. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I've never seen it go well in my own life
yeah,
from a health standpoint.
right.
And I haven't seen it go well in other leaders' lives. And so I love your idea of that second mountain. It's this idea of just, how do you keep going? How do you stay the course? And where are you going? And why are you going there? And really getting in, like I said, of these hidden conflicts underneath the surface. We spend a lot of time just navigating through some of that.
I love that idea of hidden conflicts. That's so good. And I think the other thing that you said too, that I think is really important for leaders listening to understand, is that it's a journey and it's not
Mm.
a destination. You know, and I have to tell you, you look, it took me a long time, and I think it's still I'm still learning this, that it isn't a destination, and that I can enjoy the journey, and I can
Yep.
enjoy it, and also just kind of be in that journey and know that, okay, yeah, I'm probably going to get to a point where I'm at the summit. I get a goal, I achieve a goal,
Yeah.
but then I need to be looking ahead and looking out, and raise my vantage point so that I can see beyond where I'm at right now, so that I can see what's the next part of the journey, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm. For
I love
sure.
that. Man, that's so good, Justin. Um, so I'm curious. So how can people get in touch with you? How do they, I'm sure you said something today that sparked somebody's thoughts, and hey, maybe I want to be a part of this cohort. Maybe I want to be a part
Yeah.
of the academy. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the easiest way is shoot me an email, jbrown at staythecourse leaders.com. You can check out all that we do on staythecourse leaders.com. And we have a leadership podcast that goes out. We're really having conversations around drift and just leadership lifestyle. You can find that on Apple and Spotify, but I'd say the easiest way is jbrown at staythecourse leaders.com. I love chatting with leaders. I'm sure, David, you feel the same way. It just gives so much
Absolutely.
energy, and you just kind of, you start to relate and go, these are my people, and
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Yeah.
shoot me an email there, and yeah.
I love it. I love it. Well, I love that idea, and I love the idea of bringing leaders together, and putting them into an environment, especially something like your academy, be able to help them to learn and grow and be a part of other leaders. And there's nothing better than to be in that environment, and to go along that journey together, because there's nothing more lonely than being a
Yeah.
leader going by yourself, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and
you're dead on it.
Well, and I think, to me, like, I go back and I think of, I've done some stuff with some friends who, we've done some mountain climbing, and I think I would have
Mm.
never gotten to the summit without having them along. And I think it's so important to be able to have that cohort, that pack, that group of people that surround you, that tell you, yeah, it's okay to take a break right now,
Yep.
then we got to get going. Let's keep going, keep moving on, and spur you on, and keep pushing you to the top. And so
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So I love what you're doing, man. I just absolutely love it. And I want people to reach out to you.
Yeah.
So let me ask this, Justin. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about today that would really, help either emerging leaders, or sometimes it's the senior leaders who kind of look around the boardroom and go, man, I have not done a good job of
Mm.
preparing my leaders, for the next season of life, or the next season of leadership, the next season of our business. Anything that you would add?
So there's one concept I've been wrestling with a lot lately. This is just kind of how my brain works. I go for a run, or I'll just
Yes.
toil with something for a while, and then eventually it's like I'm done and it goes. But I've been wrestling a lot with this idea, and I would just encourage any leader listening to this, wherever they're at on the journey, whether they're the CEO and they've got leaders on leaders on leaders underneath them, or if they're just starting out. I would love to see a paradigm shift in the leadership community, where we begin to view this like it is a true skill that can be developed. I just despise it over the years, this idea of, oh, there's such a natural leader. I don't really, there's not a term I hate more than that, the natural leader. This idea that you kind of have a guy, hands in his pockets, and he's just winging it and just playing at a high level. There's no other environment, there's no other skill in, or position in life where that happens. If you want to be an
Yeah.
elite chef, you have to do the work to become an elite chef. If you want to be an elite Olympic athlete, we don't just look at them and go, they're just such a natural athlete. No, they have just completely committed to developing at their level. We didn't look at Peyton Manning and go, he's just such a natural quarterback. I mean, he's just winging it out there. That's just not what we would associate with the type of effort that it takes to be elite at what they do. And I would love to see in leadership life that mentality start to shift to, this is a skill to develop, just like I can develop a forehand in tennis, or I can develop my ability to grill chicken on the propane gas grill. These are all things that we have a growth mindset about, and say, I'm going to just commit to getting better and better and better at it. And I would love to see in leadership life, especially from senior leaders on down, is we begin to say, this is a skill. You need to develop your skill. You need to, level up what's going on. And it's not an attack on their identity. It's just, we need to get better at some things. And I would love to see that kind of be a permeating view in the leadership world, because I don't think it's been that way historically. So
you're so spot on, man. I love that, Justin. That's good place to end, and really encourage all of the listeners. If you're a senior leader, if you're an emerging leader, if you're an advancing leader, anywhere on the spectrum of leadership, don't just drift. Be really intentional and become that elite leader that you can be. And I just want to encourage everybody. This has been a great conversation, Justin.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
My pleasure. I know this isn't going to be the last time, because I'm really excited about anybody who is intentional, anybody who is got a heart for emerging leaders, is got my heart as well. So I really appreciate you having you on today.
Yeah, thanks again. I appreciate it. Looking forward to more conversations.
Well, that was such a great conversation. Again, I'm really sorry about the audio quality on my end. And again, I'm not exactly sure what happened with Zoom. It was just kind of cutting in and out. But hopefully you were able to hear the answers and the things that Justin was sharing, because honestly, he shared some real gold, especially for those of you who are emerging leaders. And I do absolutely love talking with other leaders who have a heart for emerging leaders like I do. And as I normally do on these podcasts, what I like to do is just kind of pick a couple of things that are important from this conversation to recap it. And I think the very first thing that I need to bring up here is that one thing that Justin said is he had a mentor. And so I want to encourage you, if you don't have a mentor yet, if you don't have somebody, if you don't have a coach, go get a mentor, get a coach. Justin's mentor was a reader and a lifelong learner. If you can find somebody who is a reader, who has read widely, man, I'm telling you, you are going to get so much from that, because those kinds of mentors, those kinds of coaches will be able to draw from not only their own experience, but also the experiences of the authors that they've read. And being a lifelong learner means you're taking all of those things that you've read and all of your experience that you've had and mashing it all together like a wonderful stew. And you can impart that into others. And I absolutely love that. I also really like the fact that he was talking about presence and being aware of what that presence is all about. And honestly, not that long ago, I was teaching on the six-figure mentorship program that's a part of the Empowered Living community. And a question came up in the Q&A component and at the end of my teaching. And the book Presence by Dr. Amy Cuddy came up when I was answering a question. And so I would just say, if you have an interest in that, if you have an interest in presence, in executive presence, and in confidence, make sure you go check out the TED Talk that Amy Cuddy did. And then you can check out her book called Presence. The other thing about confidence and presence was really more about being very intentional with your appearance and being able to contribute to conversations, being very intentional and being very consistent about doing the thing that you need to do despite your feelings. And if you want some practical tips on gaining that confidence and presence, again, another book to check out is a book called Beyond Confidence by Helen Fruin, who was also a guest on the podcast. She was on episode 11, just a few episodes ago here in season 2. The other thing that I will mention that I think is a really important thing for leaders to do, especially emerging leaders, and that is practice journaling. Practice things like, what are you feeling? Use it as a mind dump. Throw your ideas out there on paper. Express your frustration. That putting things on paper, out of your mind, and onto paper is really the first part of that creation process. And if you aren't a part of the Emerging Leader Inner Circle, this is one of the things that we teach you, and one of the practices and the skills that we teach you. And so we'd love to have you join us in the Emerging Leader Inner Circle. But by doing this practice, by journaling, by looking within yourself, by actually even creating some other morning routines, other rituals that you can work on yourself and really dive into your own thought processes and your own psyche, that's a practice that all great leaders do. So create some fundamentals for yourself, create some behaviors that you live by. And when you do that, then practice those behaviors. I loved what Justin said about drift, that idea of fighting drift, because so often, we all have intentions, we have great intentions, and the thing is, over time, those intentions can level off and they can wane. But to fight drift, it really takes a community. And so, again, I know I probably sound like a broken record, but being a part of an inner circle group to keep you sharp and to keep you growing and keep you fighting drift, you are going to really be much more effective when you have a community around you. So don't be on the leadership journey by yourself. An inner circle, a group of leaders that you have a close affiliation and tie to, a mastermind group, can help you when your motivation wanes. And really, again, one of the best ways to do that is to join us at the Inner Circle Summit. We're going to have a room full of leaders that will definitely be the kind of leaders that you want to be around and have in your inner circle. You can network with them. You can ask them questions. They're all on the leadership and growth journey as well. So again, once again, you can go to davidmcglennon.com/Inner Circle Summit 2022. Get registered before we sell out. And thanks again for joining me here on the podcast. Please do me a favor, give us a rating and then type in just a quick review, something that maybe you've gotten from the podcast, some great takeaway, or one thing that you like, maybe a subject matter that you like. That helps us to be able to understand what's resonating with you. So thanks again for being with us again, and be intentional with your growth journey and be well.